Imagine waking up tomorrow to a push notification that says Jeff Bezos has purchased the Amazon rainforest. Not the website, the actual forest, all 5.5 million square kilometers of it. The trees, the rivers, the jaguars, the 30 million people who live there, all of it, in one transaction. He slaps a smile logo on the world's largest oxygen factory and starts charging a subscription fee to breathe. Prime members get a discount. Everyone else gets a paywall between themselves and photosynthesis. Sounds insane. Sounds illegal? But is it mathematically possible? Let's find out. Before we buy a rainforest, we need to understand what we are actually shopping for. The Amazon rainforest covers 5.5 million square kilometers. That is roughly the size of the contiguous United States. You could fit the entire United Kingdom inside it 22 times. It spans 9 countries. 60% of it sits in Brazil, with the rest split across Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana. This is not a backyard vegetable garden. This is a living, breathing, continent-sized organism that produces roughly 6% of all the oxygen generated by land-based photosynthesis on Earth. It stores 150 billion tons of carbon, the equivalent of about 15 years of global fossil fuel emissions just sitting quietly in the wood. And it cycles 20 billion tons of water vapor into the atmosphere every single day, creating entire weather systems for the rest of South America. Now, Jeff Bezos is worth approximately $230 billion in 2026. He has already pledged $10 billion through his Earth Fund to fight climate change. A noble gesture. But $10 billion is what the Amazon generates in rainfall services alone for Brazilian agriculture every single year. It is a tip. So what would it cost to skip the charity and just buy the whole thing? The Amazon rainforest is 550 million hectares. In the Brazilian Amazon, forested land currently sells for anywhere between $100 and $1,000 per hectare, depending on how accessible it is and how many venomous snakes are included for free. If we use a conservative average of $400 per hectare for the forested portions, which is generous since most of this land is remote, roadless, and patrolled by jaguars, the land cost alone comes to approximately $220 billion. Jeff Bezos is worth $230 billion, which means he can technically afford the sticker price of the entire Amazon rainforest and still have $10 billion left over for snacks. But here is the first problem. You cannot just walk into 9 sovereign nations and say, I would like to purchase your largest natural resource, please. That is not how international relations work. Brazil alone would need to agree to sell 60% of the forest, roughly 330 million hectares. This is 40% of Brazil's entire land area. It would be like asking the United States to sell everything west of the Mississippi to one man from Seattle. Then you have to negotiate with Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, Guyana, Suriname, and France. Because yes, French Guiana is technically part of France, which means Bezos has to negotiate with the European Union to buy a piece of the Amazon. Good luck with that. But let's say through some combination of bribery, charm, and an extremely persuasive Prime Day promotion, Bezos pulls it off. He now owns the Amazon. Every tree, every river, every square meter of canopy. Now he needs to run it. To patrol and protect 5.5 million square kilometers from illegal logging, mining, and poaching, he needs the largest private security force in history. Brazil currently employs around 1,500 environmental enforcement agents for the entire Amazon. That is roughly 1 agent per 2,200 square kilometers, an area bigger than London. If Bezos wants actual coverage, he needs at least 50,000 armed rangers. At $40,000 a year per ranger, that is $2 billion annually, just in payroll for people whose job is to argue with bulldozers. Infrastructure, the Amazon has almost none. There are only a handful of roads. Most of it is accessible only by river or air. Bezos needs satellite monitoring, drone fleets, river patrol boats, and forward operating bases scattered across an area the size of Europe. That is another 5 to 10 billion upfront, with 1 to 2 billion per year in operating costs. But here is the part everyone is actually thinking about. Could Bezos charge people for oxygen? Here is the math. The popular claim is that the Amazon produces 20% of the world's oxygen. The real number is closer to 6% of oxygen produced by photosynthesis on land. But here is the twist. The Amazon also consumes nearly all of the oxygen it produces. The trees, the insects, the microorganisms in the soil all breathe it right back in. Scientists say the Amazon's net contribution to global oxygen is effectively zero. So Bezos cannot actually charge for oxygen. The forest breathes as much as it exhales. But what he can charge for is carbon storage. The Amazon holds 150 billion tons of carbon. At the global social cost of carbon, roughly $50 per ton in 2026, that stored carbon is worth $7.5 trillion. If Bezos turned around and said to the world, "Pay me to not burn this down," he would be running the most effective protection racket in human history. At the scale of carbon credits the forest generates, roughly 1 to 2 billion tons of CO2 absorbed per year, Bezos could theoretically invoice the planet $50 to $100 billion annually. That is more than Amazon the company made in net income in 2025. He would be earning more from not touching trees than from running the world's largest retailer. Now let's watch everything burn. Figuratively, and then literally. Just like every other billionaire thought experiment, Bezos's $230 billion is not cash. It is Amazon stock. The moment he starts liquidating $220 billion in shares, Amazon's stock price collapses. His net worth shrinks as he spends it. By the time he has sold enough to buy the rainforest, he can probably only afford half of it. He now owns an awkward vertical strip of jungle running through Peru and wonders where it all went wrong. The Amazon is not empty. Over 30 million people call it home, including 2.2 million indigenous people from 350 different ethnic groups, some of whom have never been contacted by the outside world. You cannot evict them. You cannot put them on a lease. Many of their territories predate the countries that drew the borders. International law, specifically the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, explicitly protects their right to own and occupy their ancestral land. Bezos just bought a forest that comes with 30 million tenants who have been there for 12,000 years and did not agree to a terms of service update. No nation on earth is going to sell sovereign territory to a private citizen. The moment this deal becomes public, Brazil's Congress declares a national emergency. 9 countries freeze Bezos' assets. The United Nations General Assembly passes a resolution condemning the purchase. NATO holds an emergency meeting, not because this is a military threat, but because nobody knows what form to fill out when a single human being tries to buy a biome. Even if Bezos overcame every legal, political, and financial barrier, the Amazon itself is one of the most hostile environments on the planet. It floods for half the year. Temperatures hover around 33 degrees Celsius with near 100% humidity. There are bullet ants whose sting feels like being shot. There are parasitic fish that can... You know what? We are not going to talk about the fish. Google Candiru on your own time. Managing 5.5 million square kilometers of hostile tropical wilderness is not like running a warehouse in New Jersey. The Amazon loses roughly 10,000 square kilometers to deforestation every year. Illegal gold mining poisons the rivers with mercury. Wildfires are becoming more frequent as climate change dries out sections of the canopy. Bezos would be spending billions per year just to stop the thing he bought from disintegrating. So, could Jeff Bezos buy the Amazon rainforest on raw land value alone? Shockingly, yes. At roughly $400 per hectare, the sticker price of the world's largest rainforest is approximately $220 billion, just barely within his net worth. This is the most alarming fact in this entire video. One human being on Earth can almost afford to personally purchase the most important ecosystem on the planet. But could he actually do it? Absolutely not. The liquidation crash, the 9 sovereign governments, the 30 million residents, the international law violations, and the small matter of the Amazon producing zero net oxygen and therefore being a terrible subscription product all combine to make this the least practical real estate deal in history. The irony is that Bezos named his entire empire after this forest. He borrowed its name, became the richest man on Earth. And his $10 billion Earth Fund, the largest climate pledge in history, is still only a fraction of what it would cost to actually protect the thing he named himself after. The Amazon is not for sale, but the uncomfortable truth is it probably should not be possible for one person to even get close to affording it, and right now, someone can. I'm David, and welcome to E.T.E. Thanks for watching.